So this is the intro 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Patriot Perspective. Today I'm joined here with Ofer,
Hello.
and we have an exciting interview we're conducting with a mayoral candidate for New York City, Jim Walden. He is one of the brighter mayoral candidates we are going to see, and I'm excited to jump right in. So let's get started. I'm here with Jim here, who is currently running for mayor of New York City, along with the several other candidates running for mayor. Jim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to join the race and your career before, running for mayor?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on, both Gregory and Ofer. I look forward to the discussion. So, I guess I'll start with my background for those people in your audience that don't know me. My name is Jim Walden, and I was born in a working class town in Pennsylvania, and I went to public school there and left shortly after my graduation, and had a bit of a hard scrabble life after that. I slept on a floor for a year, worked odd jobs until I got my way to college, and then I graduated from Hamilton College and then Temple Law School. At Temple, I did quite well and caught the bug for public service, but I clerked for a year with a federal judge and then ultimately went to a law firm until I started at the U.S. Attorney's Office. That's a federal prosecutor's office. I was primarily focused on both organized crime and international heroin trafficking. I served there for 9 years, and then I became a private lawyer. I worked at two international law firms. One as the co-chair of the White Collar Defense and Investigations Group, so that was a pretty significant job with pretty serious cases. And then about 10 years ago, I started my own firm that has grown into, I'm happy to say, one of the premier litigation firms in the city. So over that course of time, obviously, public service was super important to me. There were institutions that failed us when I was growing up. My father was a profound alcoholic. He lost his job. We stood in many benefit lines, and it was certainly an imperfect period. But from that, I developed a desire to help other people so that I could try to shield people from some of the insecurities that we faced financially when I was a kid. So that public service even ran through my private practice after I left the U.S. Attorney's Office. I did a considerable amount of pro bono work, and the pro bono work was largely facing government agencies when people were being underserved or they were being victimized. And so, one of my first cases was there were 10,000 families in New York City that had been thrown off a food benefits program, and I got them restored. The entire public housing community was suffering through lead in their apartments, and the agency responsible for remediating the lead was not even doing inspections. So we filed a lawsuit and got an injunction. Um, Kids in New York City were being bullied at epic levels, and suicide rates were going up. And so we filed a class action on behalf of public school parents across the entire city and resolved the case with a brand new compliance system to make sure that the city of New York was doing its job. So I did a litany of these cases over the course of 23 years, and from that was retained by a lot of elected officials to sue agencies that weren't doing their jobs or were victimizing communities. Met a lot of elected officials, both as clients and adversaries, and learned a lot about city policy, what was good, what was bad, what was working, what was not working. And then for the last 10 years or so, I became much more politically focused. I saw firsthand some of the problems in the de Blasio administration and how the promise of his mayoralty didn't live up to certainly my expectations. And then with Mayor Adams, where there was a promise of centrist policies that would serve New Yorkers, what we saw is epic corruption. And so in October of last year, I decided that I couldn't sit on the sidelines anymore. I knew that I had the will, the desire, the credentials to serve as mayor, and decided to file. Ironically, I filed on the same day as Zorhan Mamdani, who I had not heard of at the time, but I've been in the race since.
Thank you. And looking at your legal career, and you mentioned this to a certain degree, you looked at the way in which there were certain issues in public housing. So specifically on the issue of housing, which is very important to the residents of New York City. Can you outline what your platform is for housing, which you have already done on your websites, and explain what you mean by building 50,000 new houses per year? What are you going to do in relation to zoning laws? What is your plan in relation to rent stabilizers or freezing rent? Do you support that sort of policy? Do you oppose it? So just give us a sort of synopsis of your view and vision for housing over the next couple of years.
Yeah. So I know how the housing space very well. Over the course of my private practice career, I've done a lot of work that touches on development and zoning and air rights and the like. So I know the space very well. That's why my housing policy is so detailed. It's about 106 pages long, as you said, over. It's on my website, and it's pretty complicated. But the basic gist is that we need to build more and we need to build bigger and we need to use all of the tools that the city has. Some of the restrictions are from Albany, and certainly I'm going to challenge that as mayor so that we can kind of open the floodgates. Any expert will tell you that in order to just maintain we need about 50,000 new rent stabilized apartments a year. Now, when we talk about rent stabilization, that's about 1 million people, families in New York that live in rent stabilized housing. That's stabilized by dint of laws that are both local laws and laws from Albany that govern what can happen with the rents in that kind of cohort. But there's also building market rate apartments, and we need more of those as well. So overall, my plan calls for the building of about 147,000 market rate units a year and 50,000 between rent stabilized and new NYCHA buildings. And as I'm sure you know and your audience knows, NYCHA is the New York City Housing Authority. That's public housing. Um, with rent stabilized apartments and with the NYCHA housing, all of those buildings are extremely old. Not all of them, but many of them are very old, predating 1974. And so many of them are in terrible condition. And so you need a comprehensive plan in order to build that ambitiously. That's, roughly 200,000 new units a year throughout the entire ladder of housing in New York City. And you can get there by simply giving developers the incentives that they need, while at the same time extracting concessions for them for things like very low cost plots of land that the city has either available to it or is accessible to it, and also streamlining the red tape that developers have to go through. Right now, if you start a project, you're probably 3 or 4 years away from putting shovels in the ground. I want to speed that timeline considerably so that we can start building in my first year of my administration. So in those ways, I will bring rents down through some market forces and then some more direct stipends for tenants. So over to your question specifically, um, there's been a lot of talk in this race about freezing rents. Freezing rents for the million people and families that are in rent stabilized apartments is an overcorrection because about a third of those people can afford their rent and they don't need to have the rent frozen in order to be able to live at a comfortable level. There's about 250,000 people and families that are in rent stabilized housing that are severely rent burdened. And when the government talks about severely rent burdened, that means they're paying it 50% or more of their income on rent alone. And some of those people are at the 70, 80% level. And so if you can imagine being a family of four and paying 70% of your income on rent, that leaves almost nothing for other expenses that you need. So I have a specific plan that's called the Lower the Rent Plan for that group of people so that we can give them direct stipends. We won't be giving it to them, we'll be giving it to their landlords. And that solves a couple of different problems. First of all, it will bring their rent payments from whatever it is above 50% to well below 50%, only 35% of their income. So the families will benefit. And the stipends will be given directly to the landlords. And so the landlords have to deal with non-payment or late payment issues, particularly with severely rent burdened tenants, obviously, because they're rent burdened. And so it gives a direct pipeline of money so that they can make the capital repairs that they need, the improvements, and the entire portfolio can get better.
Yeah. Yeah, Jim, something that really stuck out to me that you said was, streamlining the development process from when a developer decides to actually move forward with a project to when shovels are in the ground. That has been talked about for years, and administrations in the mayoral election for New York City, but no one actually has done it. Can you give us a little bit more of a explanation of how you actually plan to accomplish it compared to, Eric Adams or de Blasio's administration, who promised the same thing but never actually moved forward with it?
Yeah, so I can give you two specific examples, although simplifying and streamlining the bureaucracy is a big plane to land. But two simple examples are this. For what I will call medium size and smaller size rent stabilized developments, the
Mhm.
city can actually create a set of plans for the internal structure of the buildings that's pre-approved. And the developer would be required to change the facade so that it met whatever the community was that the building was going to be put in. But if the developer agreed to use the city's pre-approved plans, all of the necessary requirements would
Yeah.
already be met because the city would have created the plans to begin with. So it will greatly streamline those projects, whether they're four-story buildings or 10-story buildings. And for smaller plots of land where we can start building affordable housing, we can get started on those right away. Secondly, one of the problems with the way the city works is a development company that wants to start a new project that will include rent, either rent stabilized or below market rents, has to go to so many different agencies to get their approvals because all of the agencies sit in their silos. I'm going to create a vertical agency specifically for housing development so that I can streamline that and put it on an actual time clock
Mhm.
so that the city's responsible to the developer to get the process done, to get the approvals necessary or the changes to the plan that are going to release the developer to start putting shovels in the ground.
Yeah, definitely. And now moving on from your housing plan, which sounds wonderful, I want to go into education. So something you should know about me personally is for 16 years of my life, I had undiagnosed ADHD and I was stuck in a public school system. I was a failing student. I couldn't read, I couldn't write. And then only last year when I got diagnosed, I was able to completely change the trajectory of my life really by reading my first book and
Congratulations.
finding, yeah, thank you so much, finding my interest in politics. But the point is that there's thousands of students just like me all around New York City and, to be honest, around our country. And that is because the public school system is neglecting us. The public school system does not have the resources to, individually cater towards each individual student. But in New York City specifically, we have a solution in which charter schools are being able to cater towards the needs better than public schools are, like Success Academy, for example, and other charter school systems. And we also have specialized high schools, both of which Zohran Mamdani and other mayoral candidates are fundamentally opposed to. I wanted to get your thoughts. Are you opposed to charter schools and those education needs? And if not, how do you plan on expanding them to have access so New Yorkers all around the city could have access to them?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Gregory, and I salute you on your journey as someone that was almost left behind by my public school system and really only broke through in my junior year of my high school career. I can empathize with your journey, and there's lots of kids who suffer from undiagnosed learning disabilities, and we need to focus on them more. So I have one of the more exhaustive education plans among the candidates. I'll start at the level of there are a lot of school districts that are severely disadvantaged, and there are kids that can't even read or do basic math at the fourth grade level. All over the city, our proficiency rates are 50% as a general matter, but if you really drill into specific schools or specific districts, the rates are even lower. So the one thing I'm going to do is create a mayor's district of those schools and dramatically shrink the class sizes so that we can give more individualized attention and supports to kids that are falling behind. I'm a big believer in gifted and talented programs, and I speak from experience because that 11th grade year was the first year that I was put into our school's version of a G&T program, and it really had a significant effect on my trajectory in life. So I know how important they can be. I want to expand our gifted and talented programs so they're much more accessible. There's so many kids that apply and are qualified or nearly qualified, but they can't get seats. And I want to expand the specialized high schools. I think that they've done a terrific job for students and that they will do a terrific job if we double the number of them. So in those ways, I want to really better support and better direct money that there's so much money that billions of dollars that go into our educational system. And I think it's a shame that we can't serve our public school kids better. But for that reason, I'm a believer in school choice. And I think that parents need to make the decisions about where to send their kids. Charter schools have provided an amazing education to a lot of kids. Parochial schools, yeshivas, I'm supportive of them all. And so I'm not a believer in saying to parents that want to send their kids to a charter school, no, we don't countenance that choice. I want to support charter schools and parochial schools and yeshivas as well.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, specifically, if I recall correctly, the cap right now on charter schools and high schools, like charter high schools, is 290. And so it's been that way for a couple of years now under Eric Adams. So do you support expanding it to a higher number in the future?
I do. I do. I can't tell you what the number should be, but the idea of a cap at a time when there are viable charter schools that want to expand or start here, I think is a shame. And all that does is underserve kids. And so, whatever the historic constraints have been, I very much want to open up pathways so that we can diversify the number and types of schools that there are so that parents and kids have more choice and can pick an educational, whether it's a school or a system that is bespoke to their needs and support it. Because I think that at the end of the day, we'll have better educational outcomes if we have more competition for seats.
Yeah. And just one more follow-up with education. We had Kathy Hochul and Eric Adams actually have a fallout on this exact issue when Eric Adams did not want Kathy Hochul to raise the charter school cap, and Kathy Hochul was discussing about raising it. Eric Adams was fundamentally opposed to it. So let's say Kathy Hochul wanted to raise the charter cap again under your administration. Are you telling me that you would, side with her? Would you agree with her with raising the cap?
She wouldn't have to come to me. I would go to her to tell her that she should
But
lift the cap and give students who are not doing well in their school, even if it's not the school's fault, right? A different educational environment. I mean, it's a very, very bespoke relationship between a student and a school and teachers and communities. And if there's a charter school option that'll work better for the kid, and there aren't enough charter schools to give that sort of education because they all have different pedagogies and different ways of teaching and getting through to students, then I think all we're doing is underserving kids. And the idea that we're going to limit choice because of political considerations or because we're going to irritate unions, I think that that's where bad policy starts.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
now moving on to public safety, which is also a really big concern for New Yorkers. We know that crime has generally been on the decline since 2023, 2024, but it's still higher than the 2019 pre-COVID levels. And so that's a really important goal. So I'd like to know how you intend to bring it down, and especially murders and crimes on subways and carjackings, because those are sort of the sore thumbs that are the hardest to bring down in this sort of mid 2020s period.
Yeah, and assaults as well. So,
Yeah.
so over, I think that this is an important issue, and frankly, it may be the most important issue. If people don't feel safe in their on their streets, in the subways, in their communities, then nothing else matters. People will leave New York for that reason alone, and that's why many people have left because they just don't feel safe. And so the crime statistics can be misleading. People can, and I've seen Mayor Adams do this. He stands up there and says, "We reduced crime," but we're still at really high levels. I'm not going to be that kind of mayor, right? First of all, I'm going to be transparent about where we are and where we need to be and work hard to get to the goal line rather than celebrating every single time there's a decrease, overall decrease. Because what those decreases don't tell you is that there are some communities, that constantly appear on the top of the crime chart, whether it's Mott Haven, whether it's Hunts Point, whether it's Brownsville, whether it's East New York. There's an imbalance between what we're experiencing at the core of Manhattan as opposed to what we're experiencing in other boroughs. So I care about this. Obviously, as a former federal prosecutor, I've got law enforcement experience. I know what we need to do. We need, in the first instance, to get more police officers on the street. I mean, how we got from the roughly 40,000 that we had under the Bloomberg administration to the roughly 34,000 that we have now is something that needs to be explored because nobody's ever really explained how we got that low. What we know is that we need more police officers. And so, in order to get more police officers, we have to raise their salaries. We have to do more to entice them to stay. Part of that is getting rid of the CCRB, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, which tarnishes a lot of police with unfair and unfounded allegations, and replace it with something that will really get to the heart of the bad police, of which I believe there are relatively few. But to focus there and to let the NYPD sort out the less serious complaints. And we need to just support police more. I mean, I've seen a number of incidents on the street just in the last 6 months where police officers were doing their job. Sometimes that can be a little bit rough if you have someone who's resisting the police. And I've seen gaggles of young people surround the police and pull out their phones and start screaming at the police. Like that sort of remnant of the what happened with George Floyd is still now very baked into the DNA of almost every big urban center. And it does is create a siege mentality where individual police can't do their jobs, and there's this constant tension and deriding of the police. And that's been an issue in the campaign. Some of the candidates against whom I'm running literally were supporters of the defund the police movement, and some of them went further and called the police wicked and evil and said that they wanted to dismantle the police force. To me, it's crazy policy, but it's also extremely disrespectful and shows a level of bigotry toward the police that we wouldn't tolerate toward any other group.
Yeah.
So I very much want to be the mayor that strikes the right tone from the top, which is I want to support the police. And do I want to get to the bad apples? 100%. Even as a prosecutor, I didn't appreciate when I saw abuses, and there are abuses, but to focus only on them and not focus on the acts of valor every single day in this city. There are police officers in every single borough that are keeping people safe, that are protecting people from crimes, that are saving people from crimes. And I think that we need to do more to celebrate that. And when we do all of those things well, then we'll not only be able to recruit, but retain the police that we have and ultimately create a better dialogue between the police and particularly disadvantaged communities.
Yeah, definitely. And, to transition a little bit, we saw that under Mayor Eric Adams, who is currently running again for mayor of New York City, New York turned into a sanctuary city where New Yorkers had to pay out of their own pockets to sponsor migrants coming out of South America and other parts of the world, who went to New York City, destroyed some hotels in the city, and really affected New Yorkers greatly. And, just an overall discussion of these sanctuary cities, we have to mention the federal government because the federal government played a big role in this under the Biden administration, and now under the Trump administration is playing a big role in finally ending these sanctuary cities. Mayor Eric Adams decided to deal with the federal government and the overall policy, but their overall policies in a very unique way. And I wanted to ask you, how do you plan on dealing with the federal government, negotiating with them, making sure that New York City's values are put first before other people's values?
So I'll start with the notion that I'm a decided centrist, right? I don't blow with the political winds. I believe in good policy as the key to people enjoying prosperity and safety. And that's really, at the end of the day, the two things that I want most for people is to be safe in their communities and on their streets, and to be able to enjoy what I enjoyed, which is working hard from nothing and attaining a level of success. When we get to the migrant situation, I also believe in balance. I listened, I dialed in as the migrant crisis was starting and the buses were starting to come. And I heard Eric Adams say repeatedly that he wanted to embrace migrants and give them refuge without really thinking about the collateral consequences of that. I actually went to his administration with a litigation plan to stop the buses, and they turned me away. So that's what I would have done had I been the mayor at the time, which is I would have gotten an injunction against the bus companies and stopped them from bringing migrants willy-nilly into the city with no planning whatsoever. That being said, if I was in Washington at the time, I would have counseled strongly against this open border policy that created this problem in the first place. But at the same time, I know that my family, I'm first generation on my mother's side, like literally first generation. My grandmother and my mother came in through Ellis Island, having been rescued from World War II in Austria by my grandfather, who was in the service at the time. New immigrants built this city, the skyscrapers, the transit, that was a lot of labor and sweat and imagination from immigrant communities. So I'm a believer in balance. And frankly, I think both parties go too far. And they go too far not because they want the best policy, but because in a lot of ways our system is set up for elected officials to pander to a base. I don't have a party. I'm an independent. So I'm going to be guided by my North Star, which is creating the greatest good for the greatest number. And when it comes to immigration enforcement, I believe very strongly that we need to cooperate with federal authorities to get criminal migrants out of New York City. What happened to Debrina Kawam, who was the woman who was set on fire by a Venezuelan migrant, was awful. It was one of the worst things that we've ever seen. And that should be a wake-up call to anyone that believes that we shouldn't have any enforcement. So if people fail to disclose their criminal convictions, they disclosed their criminal convictions, but they got through the cracks. They've committed crimes when they were here. They should be out of the country, and we should do everything we can to cooperate to get them out of the country. On the other side of the coin, though, we have political asylum laws for a reason. And the political asylum law was actually written by a Republican in Florida at a time when Republicans cared more about immigration than they seem to care about now. And we should not be snatching people off of the streets while they have immigration proceedings going on, or finding ways to circumvent those cases by just trying to get them dismissed so that we can shuffle people out of the country. We're a country that is distinguished and esteemed in the world because we follow the rule of law. And in my humble opinion, I think that the Trump administration has gone too far with respect to some of the immigration enforcement. And so as mayor, I would try to find balance. I would trade more robust cooperation and collaboration on getting criminal immigrants out of the country for a more humane and more dignified enforcement with respect to other people who tried to or did go through the right processes, the legal processes, in order to at least file political asylum claims after they entered the country. And I would also be a proponent of making sure that we didn't make the same mistakes of the Biden administration by opening borders again, because we need centrists to step forward to say, you can see where this led. And honestly, I haven't seen enough acceptance of responsibility by Democrats for their failings or Republicans for theirs.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it's if you're going to become mayor at some point, then Donald Trump will most certainly come to you and request that there be cooperation between the 40,000 officers and the NYPD and ICE. And he's going to lay it out in very specific manners. So I'd like to know what your response would be. Would you be willing to cooperate with him on all matters regarding to every single illegal immigrant, of which there are many in this city? Or would you put certain conditions, for instance, they have to already show you in the NYPD that the migrant committed some other crime in addition to crossing over the border illegally, or if they have some sort of proceeding that's ongoing, like would you be against cooperating on those specific issues? So I just want to know like what specifically you would tell him, because most certainly you would be one of the first people that he'd come to talk about the issue.
Yeah. So I think that what I'd say to the president under those circumstances is, you've got a partner in New York when it comes to enforcement against criminal migrants. Period. Full stop. Tell me what the city resources are that you need, and I will make them available to you unless I need more funding. And then I hope that you'll give me the funding that I need in order to balance the needs of the city for safety against the needs of Washington to have some of our help to get criminal migrants out. With respect to other communities, the answer, with respect to migrants who have gone through the legal processes required to start political asylum, I would urge the president to cooperate with me by processing the cases more quickly but fairly, right? One of the reasons that political asylum cases take so long is because there's an insufficient number of immigration judges, and those are all federal appointees. So, what I would urge the president is if you want my cooperation with respect to those people that have political asylum applications, hold off, give me more immigration judges. We'll provide the space for them to make sure that they can have, you know, hearings that comply with the law, and we'll get through the cases faster. Everybody knows that political asylum cases, because the legal standards are so high, there's a huge number of them that are eventually dismissed by the judge for lack of evidence that the political asylum claim it meets the legal standards. And then once people have their cases thrown out through a fair process, then again, I'm more than happy cooperating, directing my NYPD to cooperate with the government to make sure that those people that no longer have a political asylum case are taken back to their home country
Mhm.
humanely, in a dignified way. Not with some of the scenes that we've seen play out in communities that does nothing but divide us more.
Yeah, and as something that you've made really a core tenet of your campaign is the fact that by October, before I believe it was September, but now I've seen that you've written by October, you want other candidates in the race to sign this pledge to drop out and coalesce around one certain candidate if a poll basically shows that one of the four candidates that you're mentioning is the most popular. So based on that, why do you believe that you'd be willing to drop out and endorse any of the other candidates besides Zohran Mamdani? Like, what about him specifically makes you privy to endorsing everybody else but not him? And why are you willing to make this pledge in the first place?
Yeah. So let me just set the table by for your viewers that don't know about this, and I've taken to calling it the no spoiler pact, and I'll explain that in a minute. But this no spoiler pact was after there are two things that happened. I looked very closely at the results of the Democratic primary and saw that there was a math problem for the four markets that I will call free market candidates. So it's me, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, the current mayor Eric Adams, and the Republican Curtis Sliwa. So Adams and Cuomo are obviously Democrats who switched to being independent for political expediency, or some say their political survival. Uh, Sliwa is a Republican, and I'm the only true independent in the race. I've been an independent since 2006. So the four of us, although there are many differences between us, we all believe in the free market. We all believe in a strong safety net, but we believe in capitalism as the economic system that drives innovation and prosperity in the United States, which is why we are a model for the world. None of us feel like we want to sacrifice that for a socialist state. None of us feel as though it's appropriate for the mayor to have anti-Semitic policies. None of us feel as though it's appropriate to elect a mayor who has not only spoken repeatedly about the imperative of defunding the police, but has spoken about dismantling the police and has already articulated a policy vision that is effectively defunding the police. Don't make any mistake about that. So the differences between the four of us and the socialist candidate are very stark. However, we have a math problem. I honestly believe that the majority of New Yorkers do not want a socialist, anti-Semitic, anti-police mayor. But Zoran Mamdani will get approximately 600,000 votes if our math is correct. He got roughly 550,000 in the Democratic primary, and he'll probably get at least 50,000 of the independent voters who are left-leaning. And so that 600,000, if you think about it, in 2021, there were only about 1.1 million people that voted at all. And so that would only leave about 600,000, less than 500,000 votes.
Yeah.
And in addition, even if we were lucky enough to get a significant increase in voter turnout for the general election, which is possible given how high profile the race has become, that still only leaves 700, 800,000 votes to be split between four people. And so in this election, the four of us may essentially cancel each other out. So in order to set up a one-on-one race, I proposed this no spoiler pact, and it was a very simple idea. The idea was that in the beginning of October, and if you look back at the policy that I issued on July 3rd, which is when I issued this, it was always the beginning of October. But I said in the beginning of October, we would have a significant poll. It would have more than 2,500 people polled, and it would be winner take all, assuming that the regulators approved this, because for reasons I don't have to bore you with, we'd have to get approval from the Campaign Finance Board to do this. And if we got that approval, then whoever won the poll, the other three candidates would either endorse or they would endorse and step out of the race entirely. But the idea is to set up a one-on-one race, the socialist candidate against a free market candidate. And based on the math, I'm confident that the free market candidate, even if it's not the perfect candidate, would likely beat out Zoran Mamdani, the socialist candidate.
Yeah.
Why did I do it? I did it because I care about New York, and I care about New York more than I care about my own political ambitions. Obviously, as you guys know, I'm not a politician. I spent 30 years serving people in whatever legal form I was in, whether I was a prosecutor, whether I was a clerk, whether I was in private practice at different firms. All or a significant part of my work always was helping people and serving people. So I'm not the same kind of vain, self-centered politician that these other guys are, but I thought that they would all care enough about New York that they would put their ambitions behind collaboration, like the Democrats did during the ranked choice voting scenario, right? Because the Democrats are, ones to say, well, ranked choice voting was about collaboration, and that's how they convinced the Campaign Finance Board to allow them to cross endorse each other without getting regulatory consequences. All I'm trying to do is the same thing for the free market candidates in the general election. So I issued that, more than a month ago, and Andrew Cuomo joined on pretty quickly after John Katzimatidis, a business leader, and former Governor Patterson, endorsed the idea of the poll. And I've been waiting to hear positive news from Curtis Sliwa and Eric Adams, but they both rejected the idea of it for now.
Yeah. And we know you have to go soon, so I just wanted to ask one final
It's
question.
been 45 minutes. Oh my God, that was quick.
Yeah. Just one more question for you. If you had
Sure.
to pick a mayor that ran New York City in the past, who would you want to model after in your term as mayor?
I would say Mayor Bloomberg. That's what I've said all along because I believe that Mayor Bloomberg, first of all, he was obviously an extraordinarily successful business person. He was able to succeed both in the public and the private sector. He was obviously an incredible philanthropist and had shown his care for and concern of New York even before he was mayor. And while I had my policy and principal disagreements with him at various times during his mayoralty, I do believe that he did the best job for New York. And so there are things about my administration that I would want to be different, but he certainly is, among all the mayors that have been in the city since I've been here in 1993, my favorite.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jim. You know, I just want to, from a personal perspective, like thank you for your education policy. It would really change the lives of millions of students. So thank you so much for
Thank
what
you.
you're doing.
Thank you. And congrats on your journey. It's been
Thank you so much. Thank you.
pretty impressive, you guys. So I really take my hat to you.
Wow, that was just such an incredible interview. I mean, Jim is one of the brightest mayoral candidates I could have had on. And so, Ofer, what are your just first reactions to the interview?
I have to say that he's one of the most thorough candidates that I've ever spoken to. You could see there's a massive intellectual disparity between the other candidates in the race and him. He's far more detailed on the most important issues, housing and education, and then public safety to be specific. He actually detailed what he would do to help the city, and he wasn't running on slogans or any sort of like rhetoric that could appeal to people in a cheap manner. He's actually going through the details of everything,
Yeah.
explaining it properly, and taking ideas from every single side and combining it together. So I really like it. Tell me your initial thoughts and what most resonated with you, because I think education was a big deal that you
Yeah,
mentioned.
so first off, I want to say that he carries himself like a lawyer. He carries himself, he discusses like a lawyer. He's very bright. He is a genius and probably smarter than every other mayoral candidate there is, including Curtis Lewa. I think he's a genius. I'm very, very happy that he's in the race. And I don't think we could have had this discussion with any other candidate. Like I don't see it happening with Eric Adams or Cuomo. I just don't see it. I think they would be too focused on Mamdani. He is very policy centric, and that's what makes him so unique. My initial thoughts, though, on the interview as a whole is that his education policy would be revolutionary for students. In general, for me specifically, I know how many students struggle in New York City. This is what I focus on in school choice. And going and publicly endorsing school choice programs and charter schools in general is huge. It means that he could actually make a difference in millions of students that are in New York City and stuck in a public school system. In general, though, he is a wonderful candidate in that his policies are very thorough. I do want to actually comment on his housing policy, which is one of the first things we talked about. And my issue with it is that a lot of his promises he made are very similar to the promises Eric Adams made, de Blasio made, Bloomberg made, a lot of different mayors made, and very few could actually accomplish. So, Ofer, I wanted to get your thoughts. Do you think it's realistic for him to accomplish everything he said in the specific housing policy that he mentioned?
Well, it's going to take a lot of back and forth with Albany because some of the regulations and red tape, specifically regarding zoning laws, is really coming from the state government. There are certain restrictions on where you can build depending on where the municipality owns public property, or for instance, where there's like a residential building behind or under a commercial building and an apartment building. So like there's all these Byzantine restrictions that are making it difficult to build new housing. But he did talk about his willingness to fight to relinquish control over some of the public properties and abandoned open areas like amusement parks that got destroyed, for instance, that aren't in use, and affordable housing, just areas that would be rent stabilized in the sense that they're new housing and their maximum rent that could be allotted or could be issued to each tenant would be 25% of the median income in that particular borough. And his goal is 50,000. That's very ambitious, to be fair. But 50,000, if we were able to reach that, and it would take several years most likely to arrive like an annual 50,000 per annum rate, that would actually be a huge deal in lowering the cost.
Yeah.
It would pretty much solve the issue on a year-on-year basis because people are born obviously and move out, people move in as well. So when you take it into account, 50,000 is actually a pretty good number when you're considering that they're only rent stabilized apartments, and then private developers will also build their own properties. And then when you add on top of that everything, then it could reach like, I don't know, 75,000, 100,000 buildings per year. That would be the hope. And
Yeah.
it is possible, but only with the right policies. And if you have a backbone and you're willing to undo decades of red tape in poor policy.
Yeah, that's, in my opinion, the most important thing he said in the entire interview, and that was dismantling the red tape for developers to be able to build on unused land in New York City and be able to build with just with a simple process and a streamlined process to do so. That would be revolutionary for all New York City, but also, as you mentioned, Albany plays a huge role in all of this. So half of the regulations are set on the city and half are on Albany. They need to come together, and I think Jim would be the one to do it, to be honest, if I had to pick one person, and choose how to exactly handle the housing situation. Jim, I don't believe it will win the mayoral race looking at the numbers. I'm going to be straight up honest with you. I don't think Ofer, you believe so too. But if, let's say, Eric Adams, even no, Mamdani, I don't know, he would probably not agree with this, but Jim is the guy, in my opinion, to handle the housing crisis in New York City. He should be put in an administration to handle it. He's the guy to do it, and he could actually accomplish it, in my perspective. But now moving on into his education policy. Well, first off, I already mentioned this would be revolutionary for New York City students. But Ofer, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, it's good that you brought it up with him and you got him to like talk about specifics because New York City's education policy, there was hope when Eric Adams came in. You wrote about this, by the way. He talked about how a lot
Is it
of charter
magazine?
school.
Yeah, that's my
Yeah,
piece.
yeah. It was a good piece. And, there was a lot of hope when he came in 2021 that he would continue the legacy of expanding charter schools, expanding their caps. But it's been stuck and stagnating for several years now, despite the fact that there's, pretty substantial funding per pupil for individual charter schools. It's still between 10 to 15% less than for public schools. So there is a disparity over there, and that's completely antithetical to the entire point of school choice, which is actually allotting equal amounts of funding to each school, and then from there seeing the way in which they perform. And when we look at the numbers, when we look at the examples that you brought up, for instance, a lot of these charter schools, they're able to back up their standing based on performance, and they deserve to be given more freedom and less guidelines from the municipality and the states. So right now it's like 75% of the like curriculum has to be basically abided by these charter schools. I think it should be less because they deserve the freedom to basically innovate and create like new cutting edge ways to teach. And then if they have high scores to back it up, then there's no reason to even complain. So the fact that he's actually resonating with that, the fact that he's, heterodox on this matter compared to like the left wing, it's very good and it's going to help with education in the city 100%. And yeah, I'd like to know what you think of like specific policies on this, and I guess connected to like your own experience as well.
Exactly. So he actually mentioned this good point that the proficiency rate in New York City is 50%. That is a total lie. Number one, the actual number is 49%. Number two, uh, that is not true. It is very, very polarized in New York City. Yes, in Manhattan, the proficiency rate is probably 80% among students. Manhattan is, in general, downtown. They're nice locations to live in. You have to be rich to live and go to school in those locations. But if you go to communities like the Bronx, Harlem, their proficiency rates are significantly lower. Harlem has several districts where proficiency rates are just 0%, just zero. Not even one person passed the standardized exam. And Ofer, you took those exams, and I took those exams. Uh, if you don't pass it, there's a serious concern there, okay?
Yeah.
Um, but those communities are the ones who charter schools help most, and that's what I want to see. But what Jim Walden actually mentioned was that he wanted public schools to also do better. So not only charter schools, but also public schools. He wanted to create mayoral districts in the exact 0% districts that I referenced, in which he would decrease the class sizes, all of that stuff. My issue with that is that every mayor is promising to decrease class sizes. Every mayor is promising to invest more in education. The result, though, is never actually correct. New York City spends $38,000 per student, the most any city in the entire country spends, and our education is still bad. So throwing money at the problem, hiring more teachers, I don't know if that's going to necessarily help. Not only that, but we see that most of the money per student, even if it's going for teachers in these low communities, in low income communities that are horrible and you don't want to go to school there, teachers also don't want to teach there. That's why they tend to get the like teachers that are straight out of college, all of those, the less experienced teachers, because they're kind of the only ones that are willing to go to those communities. And then they'll move out once they gain experience. That's the issues with these communities. Mayoral candidate Walden never actually commented on that point, but I think it's a significant issue. I think that the teacher education really needs to be fixed in New York City before we can even go into the public schools and lower class sizes. Because if we have no teachers that are qualified, then what's the point of even having smaller class sizes?
I really like that point. And I think the solution is just to break up the teachers' unions because they're engaged in
That's
a
the
race to the
solution to
bottom.
everything, over. That's the
Yeah, exactly.
solution.
They're literally in a race to the bottom because they don't want standards upheld. Imagine if we were giving out bonuses to teachers based on their performance and the performance of their students compared to before they joined. That would incentivize high
Randy
quality
Weingarten
teaching.
is going to have a heart attack over that. So
Yeah, she would be so scared that would destroy her entire purpose. Imagine if people from Nassau County and Suffolk County that are like good teachers that are like increasing the standards over there, like they saw, oh, you could get bonuses if you're, pretty good and you have pretty good intellect. And then they move over there to New York City. That would increase the standard in public schools. And I think that there has to be more emphasis on charter schools, obviously. I'm happy that he talked about it, that he mentioned that. But yeah, we definitely need to address the teachers' unions issue. He talked about it a little, but like we need to really go after them, really criticize them because they're at the nexus of the issue.
and Ofer, on a personal note, I don't want to name the teacher, but we had a lot of teachers. We used to go to the same school district,
Yeah.
and who was your eighth grade English teacher? You don't have to mention his
Yeah,
name.
yeah, yeah.
Do you think he would still be in office? Let's say these plans came to fruition.
Well, we, with him, we have to change the entire curriculum. Like, it's not even his problem. It's like the entire curriculum's problem. The fact that they're pushing down this like completely insane, basically racial caste system ideology. It's
Sorry.
completely absurd. Yeah.
So is that a yes? Is that a yes
Look,
or no? My
look,
apologies.
he's a smart person, but you gotta train him, retrain him, I would say.
I I
Tell
I
him
I
this
agree.
is what's appropriate to teach. This is what is inappropriate to teach in a class setting.
Okay, I agree with you on that point. And now to move on into some more pressing matters going on to the mayoral election. He also mentioned, aside from his education policy, he mentioned a lot of things to do with safety and public safety. He didn't go into great depth of why and
Yeah.
what his actual plan is, which I found a little bit surprising. And I would assume that it's because he doesn't really have you can't have a new plan in public safety other than increasing police, decreasing. It's a very, homogeneous thing. But he mentioned that even though our crime rates are down and significantly down since, let's say, 3 years ago, it doesn't actually show improvement in our city. It actually just is a facade on that disguises the true crime situation in New York City. So what are your thoughts on that, Ofer?
He's right, because crime overall can go down if like petty crimes aren't prosecuted, if we're not really criminalizing it to the same extent. You look at vandalism, burglary, petty burglary, theft, vagrancy, all those sort of stuff. Like maybe that's on the decline, but that's not the heart of what's affecting New Yorkers. The most important things are violent crimes, assaults, murders,
Yeah.
pushing people on subways, all those sort of carjackings as well. And those are still higher than they were in 2019, which is the gold standard because it was pretty low back then, but it should be even lower. And yeah, you talked about it. Lower increasing police presence is very important. They need to receive more benefits, I believe, even though they already do have a lot of pretty good overtime pay, I would say.
And
Um,
teachers need to receive more benefits, right?
well, it's depending on the performance, I would say. It depends on
Oh,
their
so
performance.
Randy Weingarten, you don't think she should increase the benefits of teachers? Are you telling me that she's not a good
Well,
leader for the teachers
she's
union?
only been a negative since she joined like the public school. system, you
What
know?
a just anti-public school person. I mean, horrible. Horrible, I say.
Yeah, I need to atone for my sins, I guess, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, but I agree with you. And something I find very interesting that he also brought up is that our police force has shrunk immensely since Bloomberg. Like from number what was it, like 50,000, I believe he said, to
Yeah.
34,000, which is a immense decrease, and but our city has grown significantly. So what is going on? Why do we shrunk the police force? And I blame people like Mamdani for that
Yeah.
because Mamdani, if for a lot of viewers that don't know this, he's in the state assembly currently. So he's in power already, regardless if he's mayor or not. So he can vote for more police, less police, and he has voted for less police. His own charter, the DSA charter, wants to decrease the amount of surveillance cameras in schools and fully remove them. I don't understand that plan. Wants to decrease the amount of armed guards in school, wants to end metal detectors in school. So when we have those people in power currently, which he is a person in power and about to get elected for a much, much bigger role, then obviously police presence is going to go down. He mentioned also George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd. Look what
Yeah.
happened to Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin was a political prisoner who got arrested, and maybe that arrest was warranted. Maybe he should have spent a year or two in jail. I don't know. But his trial was not fair. That is obvious to any person with a rational mind. His trial wasn't fair, and he should not have been treated the way he was in court. And when we have police officers like him being prosecuted and their whole life being ruined, he'll never have a job again after what happened to him, then obviously we'll have a situation where people are gonna, hate police. We're gonna have that situation. And that's what we're seeing in New York City. That's why people are so anti-police. Not only that, but no one is joining the NYPD. Luckily, though, we just had the biggest police graduating class this year, actually, in since 2019, which is good. But still, we need significant more improvement. We're not anywhere close to there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And part of it is fostering a culture of respect for police officers. It started in 2015 with the Ferguson riots, with, you know, Michael Brown, his killing, which, afterwards the police, when you look through the forensic investigation, they were completely justified in acting in self-defense. But the consequences were that people felt that they could do more without the police going after them. And the police, to the contrary, were more scared to engage with certain communities because they feared that, they could get canceled, that they can
You can
have the
go
book thrown
even
at
more
them.
back from that. Yeah, you could go to
Yeah,
frisk and stop and frisk was being canceled and
yeah,
put down by the court. So when that happened, police were like, okay, what the hell? I'm put my life is in danger on the line. So this is like a history like of severe crime. I was actually on Real America's Voice on the Turning Point Tonight show yesterday, and I actually discussed this exact issue, how in ICE, for example, how people
yeah.
in ICE now, because they're being given so many incentives, they could join. But the thing is that also ICE is being so hated right now by normal Americans that we have a culture of just hating ICE, and that's going to prevent people from joining. We're going to see that eventually. I could guarantee it. Whether it's going to be this year or next year, there's going to be an immense decline in the amount of people who are going to be applying for ICE. Also, similarly to that exact same point, ICE, for example, is all ICE does is they enforce the law which citizens and Congress made. So hating on ICE for enforcing the law that Congress made is the wrong way to do it. You could go to a political protest. You can cast your vote on people who support whatever you support. I don't care, but you can't hate on ICE. And the same goes for law enforcement. Same exact thing.
Yeah, I agree. And it goes more than just that. I wanted to ask him, but we didn't have the time. But I wanted to know his stance on bail because he was criticizing the bail system in New York City.
Yeah.
And he talked about, the types of risk assessment that are needed. And also, he talked about broken windows policing on his platform,
Yeah.
essentially meaning that they would be very strict with enforcing three strike rules and looking at people that evade fare payment when they go on the train, people that are drawing graffiti everywhere, people that are on the street in like unauthorized zones. So when you start off with those people and ensure that they are accounted for, they can't go on and increase the escalation ladder and then commit and reoffend and do things that are far more sinister. So that's something that he mentioned, but I wanted to like get into more detail with him about it. But
Yeah.
those are also a part of the solution, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. And look, you bring up the three strike rule, and surprisingly, the person who created the three strike rule was the very
The
good,
one and only.
yeah, the one and only Joe Biden. So he was the very person who originally
Good for
created,
him. Yeah.
yeah, the three strike rule. And it just shows that these people used to be rational. They used to have some thought behind their heads. Now they're players of Nancy Pelosi and her evil tentacles. So, it's true. I mean, it's ridiculous what happened, and I'm very glad that we are having some sense of like normalcy come back to the city. Now, finally, he discussed one more issue, and that is how he would deal with the federal government. This is what surprised me the most out of everything he said. He said that he would be a partner with the Trump administration. He would not be a person against, but he would encourage the Trump administration to uh, allow or make their ICE raids more humanely than they currently are. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, how can you do it more humanely? The entire point of stopping people on the street is that they're not prepared for it. If they know that you're coming, they're going to evade detection by ICE. So you're basically narrowing the opportunities to catch people to certain circumstances wherein they're like in a house, they're in their house. Like, how could you even know that? You have to be monitoring them until they enter into their house like all day, and then you go in and like you separate them from their families. That's completely unreasonable. At this moment in time, the deportation rates and arrest rates are perhaps 15-20% higher than they were during the end point of the Biden administration. That is not even close to arriving at the necessary amount of deportations to even reverse the 10 million plus that arrived during his presidency, let alone all the other illegal immigrants, let alone the ones that committed crimes, because that's like the bare minimum, the people that committed additional crimes. Like Walden said, there's literally no other way to go about enforcing Trump's policy of mass deportations without picking people off the streets throughout their workplace when they're like going out and picking marijuana leaves off the street. Like, I don't see that's the only thing that would do is reduce the efficacy of his efforts. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I 100% agree with you, number one. Number two, it's still being debated in the Republican Party how far we want to go with this immigration thing. It's still being debated whether we're gonna just, affect the people who are committed another crime other than obviously entering this country, or whether we're gonna provide amnesty, which is the key word in the Republican Party, the most hated word, amnesty right now. So we don't know. We have to see, but. Yeah, the deportation rates under the Trump administration are definitely not any higher, and that's not because Trump hasn't been trying or Kristi Noem hasn't been trying. It's really because the media and the left is not letting Trump do his job, and that's because they are televising all of this. They're making sure that Trump is having the hardest possible time deporting people as possible. It's a very backed up process, and that I blame it on the left really on the deportation rates. I don't think Trump can be doing too much more other than hire more ICE officers, which Kristi Noem is finally doing, and the big beautiful bill adds a lot of funding for that. So I'm excited to see. Now, moving on to specifically like the fact that Jim Walden actually mentioned that he would be a partner with the Trump administration. How significant would this be to have a mayor of the biggest city in the country be a partner of the Trump administration?
Yeah, it's extremely important. Who knows how many illegal immigrants are actually in the city? It's certainly in the multiple hundreds of thousands at least. And so there has to be a way to document where they are, cooperate with the 40,000 NYPD officers and actually get to them. And then you could go through the entire proceedings, like Walden said, but actually having some sort of cooperation between the largest police body in the country and ICE is like extremely important. Now, he has some sort of caveats. So he said, first of all, he's obviously going to cooperate and try to deport people that already committed some other offense besides crossing over illegally. But he said that he would give exceptions to people that are going through asylum, applying for asylum. And, asylum, being an asylum seeker is a completely different categorization than being an illegal immigrant
Of
and going
course.
through the process. Yeah. So that's sort of like a non sequitur. But he also was sort of hesitant to endorse the idea of deporting people that, just were generally illegal immigrants and are on the docket to be removed, and said that he would like let the legal process play out of receiving their
Which is not
deportation
crazy.
order.
It makes sense. It makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, and there is a process for that that has to be sped up. And he actually mentioned, give me more judges. Like, I'll do this, you do this. So he's requesting more funding for immigration judges so the cases could go through faster. Because right now the backlog is absolutely crazy. The lawyers don't have enough time to go through everything, and the judges don't have opportunities either. So I definitely agree with that as well. And what do you think of basically the way that he laid it out and like the way that he would negotiate with Trump on this issue?
Yeah, I think it's very realistic. Look, Trump in general is a very negotiating person. He could hate you forever and he would still negotiate with you. That's what really he is. And what he has brought is very much realistic. Now, I also think his in general, his platform is very realistic for New York City in maybe the 2020 or earlier election. It would have been realistic, 2021 election, sorry. And so as a mayoral candidate, he could win New York City. I really believe so. I really believe if he really put effort into his campaign, which he does, but to in my opinion, he is not a household name yet, and he should be. Um, if he became a household name, he could win the election. I really believe so. So that's what I hope he does. He will probably, it's a little bit too late in the campaign to become a household name right now, but I hope he does. In general, I'm really liking his policies. As a whole, he, in my opinion, would be a wonderful mayor for New York City. What are your final thoughts, Hoofer?
Yeah, I concur. And I would say that his pledge to drop out by August 1st, if he's not the leading candidate besides Mamdani, that shows a lot of like personal integrity. And he
Yeah.
runs on the integrity party as well. Like that's his label. Like when you vote for him on the ballot, you'll see that's his party name. So yeah, obviously it's going to be easier for him to drop out because he doesn't have that much support at the moment. It's between 4 or 5% in the polling numbers recently. But if his achievement ends up being that he gets all the other candidates to pledge, okay, the one that does the best out of us will remain and everybody else will coalesce, that's going to be a massive victory. And it's potentially an even bigger victory than his candidacy the entire time.
Of
Because,
course.
yeah,
Yeah.
because then he could dethrone somebody else who's a free market candidate could dethrone Mamdani and win, and the situation would be far more bearable. So
Yeah.
yeah, I like that a lot.
And now, look, Cuomo is the only mayor that agreed to his policy, and it's understandable why, because right now he's the highest out of all of them in votes. I'm really calling
Yeah,
like Sliwa 100% needs to sign this pledge. He will not. He's
yeah,
very, like, you can say a lot of good things about him, but he's a very self-centered person in general. He will not sign this pledge. He does not want to. He does not believe in it. Uh, even though he actually is not doing bad in the race at all. He could
yeah,
actually be one of them. He's right now second out of all of them, so that's very impressive. I'm very proud of Siwa. He has run a wonderful campaign. He went from someone who no one knows to a wonderful second or third option for mayor. But yeah, Cuomo, Eric Adams is should sign it. He will not. He will say simply, "Oh, I'm the mayor of New York City
yeah,
currently. I have to run again." He will not do it. But yeah, it's very sad. Look, in general, New York, if this does not happen, if they don't decide to sign this pledge, then New York will go down a very bad path, and you will see me in Florida other than New York right now. So, yeah. Look,
yeah.
thank you so much, guys, for joining. Thank you so much for watching.
Of
We're gonna
course.
have very big interviews coming up, with some very, 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 very important people next week and the following week. Unfortunately, from the 16th to the 21st, we will be on a break due to some traveling issues. Uh, but
Yeah,
other than that, other than that, yeah, we'll continue filming. Thank you so much for watching, and we will uh,
yeah.
we will see you the next time we film. Thank you.
Thank you guys.